I know exactly how heavy it feels to wake up already exhausted, staring at the ceiling and wondering where your drive went. But your fading energy is not a permanent sentence of getting older. It is a physical restriction in your supply lines, and adding a fraction of a teaspoon of one specific heat to your morning is the most immediate mechanical fix to force those lines back open today. It is a terrible, quiet realization when you notice the edge is gone. You are sitting on the edge of the bed, the alarm is still echoing in your ears, and you realize the tank is completely empty before your feet even touch the floor. You pretend you just had a bad night of sleep. You pretend it is just the stress of the economy, the pressure of providing, the weight of a heavy week. But the truth is, your system is no longer producing the raw power you used to take for granted. That silent loss of vitality does something destructive to a man. It quietly dismantles your confidence from the inside out. I lived inside that heavy, exhausted state for years. For most of my late 40s and straight through my 50s, I was a high-functioning corporate sales executive. I spent my life navigating airport terminals, sitting in rental cars, and walking into conference rooms pretending I had endless energy. I was the kind of man who believed that if you were tired, you simply applied more force. You drank more coffee. You pushed harder. You ignored the dashboard warnings. That is how you survive in a highly competitive business, and I falsely assumed that was how you handled the process of getting older. When my physical and mental energy really started to fade, I did not look at the underlying mechanics of my body. I panicked, and I went looking for artificial ways to override the system. I did what millions of men do when they feel their grip slipping. I started treating my body like a machine that just needed a harsher whip. I drank massive amounts of caffeine on an empty stomach. I relied on those heavily marketed energy drinks to get me through the afternoon crash. When those stopped working, I looked into the hormone clinics that are popping up on every corner, thinking a synthetic injection of testosterone would magically rebuild the man I used to be. I was desperately trying to buy back my vitality without ever asking why it disappeared in the first place. You are taking a highly stressed, dehydrated engine that is running on restricted fuel lines, and you are chemically forcing it to rev at maximum capacity. It is not a sustainable way to live. It is a temporary patch on a failing infrastructure. My refusal to face the reality of my own physical exhaustion took a massive toll. It did not just ruin my performance at work, it ruined my presence at home. When a man is running on fumes, he retreats. He becomes short-tempered. He avoids difficult conversations. The physical distance in the bedroom grows because you simply do not have the bandwidth for intimacy. But the emotional distance grows faster because you are too ashamed to admit you are running on empty. My marriage at the time fell apart during those years. We eventually divorced. I do not blame her for leaving. I know exactly what I was avoiding, and living with a man who is quietly shutting down is impossible. I had to hit a wall of absolute physical collapse to finally look under the hood of my own body. I realized I had to stop forcing the system with stimulants and start understanding why the engine was starving. If you're a man over 50, you have to understand that energy is not a state of mind. Energy is a mechanical output. It relies entirely on the ability of your blood to deliver oxygen and nutrients through thousands of miles of microscopic vessels. But what happens to those supply lines when we get older and live under constant stress? They constrict. Think about the mechanics of it. I spent decades sitting in boardroom chairs, eating terrible airport food, and carrying the low-level anxiety of a sales quota. That lifestyle triggers a constant release of stress hormones. Those hormones physically tighten your blood vessels. They clamp down on the pipes. Over time, your vascular system loses its flexibility. It becomes stiff. For years, I was walking around wondering why my brain felt like it was wrapped in a thick fog by 2 in the afternoon. I was wondering why my lower body was not responding the way it used to. I was completely unaware that my heart was working twice as hard just to push thick blood through heavily restricted, narrowed pipes. You can drink all the caffeine you want, but if the supply lines are choked shut, the oxygen is never going to reach the brain. The plumbing simply cannot work if the pipes are clamped down. The change happened when I realized I did not need more artificial stimulation. I needed a mechanical vasodilator. I needed something to force the pipes back open. I started researching how the body actually controls blood flow. I discovered that the inner lining of your blood vessels relies on a specific chemical signal to relax and dilate. And I found out that you can trigger that signal manually, not with a pharmaceutical, but with a specific, intense compound found in a very common spice. I am talking about capsaicin, the active component in organic cayenne pepper. At first, it sounded completely ridiculous. I'm a guy from Texas living in Scottsdale. I am not the demographic for ancient herbal remedies, but I looked at it purely as mechanical maintenance. If a pipe is clamped shut, you have to introduce a chemical agent that forces the material to relax and expand. Capsaicin is a potent natural vasodilator. When it hits your system, it triggers an immediate thermal response. But more importantly, it signals your blood vessels to release a massive rush of nitric oxide. Nitric oxide is the exact compound your body uses to tell the pipes to open wide. It drops the resistance in your vascular system. I threw out the expensive energy drinks and the pre-workout powders, and I started a very specific, somewhat brutal morning routine. Before I touch a drop of coffee, before I eat anything, I take a large glass of warm water. I squeeze a little fresh lemon into it to balance the acidity, and then I drop in a quarter teaspoon of high-grade organic cayenne pepper. Not the cheap dust that has been sitting on a grocery store shelf for 3 years. The real potent material. You drink it straight down. You do not sip it. The physical sensation is immediate. It is a shock to the system. You feel the heat hit your stomach, and within 60 seconds, you can actually feel the vascular change. You feel a flush of warmth moving outward to your extremities. You are physically forcing the infrastructure to open up. You are clearing the supply lines. The real shift was not something I felt in 24 hours. You do not undo 30 years of vascular constriction over a single weekend. The vessels have to regain their elasticity over time. But after about 4 weeks of doing this specific mechanical maintenance every single morning, a fundamental, undeniable shift occurred. The heavy, lingering brain fog that used to suffocate me in the afternoon simply stopped happening. My mind felt sharper, clearer, because my brain was finally receiving a steady, unrestricted supply of oxygenated blood. My recovery time after my daily walks and my light resistance work dropped significantly. I felt a return of actual grounded energy. Not the jittery, anxious spike you get from 6 cups of coffee, but the quiet, reliable hum of an engine that is finally getting enough fuel. And then the morning response began to return. It was not forced by a blue pill. It was not a rented temporary fix. It was the natural result of clearing the blockage. The blood vessels were allowed to dilate. The resistance was gone. The flow returned naturally because the entire plumbing system was finally operating with open valves. Confidence comes back when the body starts producing its own power again. I'm 63 now. When I married Alyssa, I brought a completely different version of myself to the relationship. Alyssa is a direct, honest woman who values presence over performance. She expects me to be engaged, and she expects me to actually show up for our life together. But the hard truth is, you cannot be fully present for your partner when you are quietly exhausted and ashamed of your own failing mechanics. You check out. I can show up for her honestly now because I stopped looking for chemical shortcuts and started doing the actual daily maintenance on my own infrastructure. A lot of men are not broken. They are just trying to push fuel through closed pipes and ignoring the wrong things. We wait entirely too long to face what has changed because we think a loss of vitality makes us less of a man. We accept the fatigue as a normal, unavoidable part of getting older. We buy into the lie that our best years are behind us. The truth is, ignoring the root cause of the restriction is what actually diminishes you. Taking ownership of the mechanics of your own body, taking the time to understand your vascular system, and embracing a little bit of heat to force the pipes open is the most masculine thing you can do. I'm not telling you that drinking a glass of warm cayenne water is a magic cure for everything that hurts. I still have mornings where my joints remind me exactly how many miles are on the odometer. I am not invincible, but I am consistent. I wake up early, I hydrate, I take the heat, and I do not put anything into my system that restricts my flow. I maintain the infrastructure. You have to open the valves if you want the power to return. You are not the only man dealing with this quiet, exhausting decline. You are just the only one who can decide to fix the supply lines. Take the heat. Look at the mechanics. Simple as that.